I'm not trying to argue that there was anything.
I wish you'd answer my question. Have the gulags closed? Has the whole almost international system of concentration camps with millions of people imprisoned, often killed, has that ended?
What the argument I'm making is under the guise of these economic reforms, these free market reforms and the shift to capitalism, a very different kind of regime has been the outcome. And now this event, the killing of Litvinenko, has opened the window to some of the realities.
I will get back to you, but just as we break, and I'm not saying that the regime is so wonderful in Russia, but can we say thank the Lord? A regime that oppressed so many people for so long, that killed so many millions, is gone. Can we say thank the Lord for that?
I think that it was a good thing to move in a democratic transition, but it was a partial aborted transition. It needs to move forward, and that means we need to open our eyes to what's going on there.
All right. Have you ever heard that song, Uncle Joe Was a Great Man, about Stalin? It was still sang quite recently in some circles. I don't think I've seen that about Hitler. Back in a few moments on the Michael Coren Show. We'll see you very soon indeed. Welcome back to Michael Coren Show. Mr. Clark wanted to ask me a question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I will answer your question. I don't think anybody here is celebrating what existed in Russia, the gulags, the repression, the clampdown on all kinds of freedoms. Nobody is celebrating that. I think people were very optimistic, as you said in the 1990s, that there would be some kind of tradition or a transition, and people's expectations were very high. Now, what I take issue with is the argument that the last 20 years, essentially, haven't delivered the goods that were promised coming out of that transition. And I think it's a bit disingenuous to continue to harp back to the 70 years to say that that has thwarted that process for 20 years. I think that the idea, I mean, we talked about it earlier, that there would be more free, free markets, more independent institutions, that the free market would deliver these human rights and these freedoms, has not done that in Russia. Now, the thing I wanted to say, though, about what's happening now, I think in Russia and the degeneration of relations between the West and Russia, I think has something to do with this ballistic missile defense that Bush has been talking about in Europe.
6 missiles.
Still, Bush is, the United States is the biggest proliferator of weapons, nuclear weapons around the world, and it's not surprising that this approach to Russia, yes.
No, Pakistan.
And now, Russia has withdrawn from the ICBM treaty in response, right? Which is a very.
But there is context here, and we have a country that is trading with Iran whilst killing its Muslims in Chechnya, and behaving in a way, as it did in Afghanistan, that is brutal and unacceptable.
Sure, I'm not defending any of that.
But there are rights. Look, this is a deeply flawed country, a deeply flawed regime. But on the ground, the ability of someone to walk the streets of any major city and be a Christian, be a Muslim, be gay, be a feminist, oppose the regime. Extraordinary advances there we didn't have before. We did have a police state. It wasn't always the most vicious. In some ways, it was benign in its latter years. But the fact that those individual rights have been restored to people, or given to people the first time, you must applaud that, surely.
Sure, but I don't have certainly as generous an interpretation of the rights are of those groups in Russia.
Far greater than they were.
Yes. Perhaps, but maybe only marginally.
By the way, there's a direct and inverse relationship between the success of a country and how long it's spent under communism. The Russians spent 70 years under communism. They're having a hard transition. Their civil society, respect for the rule of law, has been destroyed. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia, and so on aren't perfect, but the shorter the period of time you spend under communism, the quicker the recovery is right now. There is a direct inverse relationship.
Well, that's a very convenient argument, because you can only point to Russia, can't you? I mean,
the other pro-Soviet states. The Ukraine was under Russian domination, as was Georgia for about the full 70 years.
Yeah.
They're having a horrible time too. So no, it's not just Eastern Central Europe. There are differences in time.
I'd like to give you the big picture. I think, and this will surprise you all, I think that America made a mistake in coming down too hard on Russia after the fall of the USSR. And they pressed them on Georgia, and they pressed them on the Ukraine, and they kept taking away all their various spheres in their world. And Russia was weak and couldn't react, but now Russia is stronger, and Russia is basically saying, we're not going to take it anymore.
It's begun to assert
So
itself.
they have come back, and now they're instigating trouble in the Middle East. They're instigating trouble wherever they come, in the United Nations and whatever, because they're saying to America, we're back in the game.
They're
And
also,
you
they're
could
also
argue we're
terrified.
moving away from a unipolar world, that there's the emergence of Russia as a larger force. There's China. You talked about India earlier.
China and India, but
what role they're going to
Russia's
play.
population is declining so rapidly that they are in genuine danger of not existing in 50 years. I mean, the Slavonic composition of Russian society will be so small because of the Soviet Union, this obsession